Hi, my name's Russ, and I'm an intern here at Dickinson College, working for the House Divided Project. And today I'm going to do my version of a close reading on what we call Lincoln's Fragment on the Constitution. And basically this is just a short note that Lincoln wrote to himself after he became president, kind of in the midst of a chaotic and crumbling American Union. And it's important to understand that this note has no specified audience, so we can really only speculate as to what it was intended for. And it appears that this was just Abraham Lincoln writing down his own thoughts, kind of organizing them, maybe for a future speech that he intended to give. And he begins the note, "All this is not the result of an accident. It has a philosophical cause. Without the Constitution and the Union, we could not have attained the result, but even these are not the primary cause of our great prosperity." So from the start, Abraham Lincoln acknowledges the privilege and the prosperity of the United States of America. He says that the Constitution and the Union are fundamental in forming this, and that it could not exist without them. However, in the next sentence, Lincoln takes things one step further. He says, "There is something back of these, entwining itself more closely about the human heart. That something is the principle of liberty to all, the principle that clears the path for all, gives hope to all, and, by consequence, enterprise and industry to all." So Lincoln believes that behind all of this is a philosophical principle that goes to the very heart of humanity. Liberty to all, he says, the ability to be free in society from oppression and restriction, is at the core of American values. He continues to write, "The expression of that principle in our Declaration of Independence was most happy and fortunate. Without this, as well as with it, we could have declared our independence of Great Britain. But without it, we could not, I think, have secured our free government and consequent prosperity. No oppressed people will fight and endure as our fathers did, without the promise of something better than a mere change of masters." In this section, Lincoln returns to the intent of the Founding Fathers. He understood that it is the pursuance of liberty that ultimately separates the United States from Great Britain and other countries. While the Constitution and the Union are able to do this in a very, very literal sense, it's the inclusion of this philosophical principle, liberty to all, that does this at a much deeper level. In other words, Lincoln seems to believe that without the aim of human liberty, a republican government can become just as oppressive as any other. And this can only occur when the majority rule or popular ideas begin to trump pre-existing moral values. So playing off of this idea of morality, Lincoln makes a biblical reference in the next section. He says, "The assertion of that principle at that time was the word fitly spoken, which has proved an apple of gold to us. The Union and the Constitution are the picture of silver subsequently formed around it." This reference to apples of gold and pictures of silver comes from Proverbs 25:11 in the King James Version of the Bible, in which it says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver." This verse evidently struck Abraham Lincoln as an analogy that fit perfectly with his view of the Constitution. He then says, "The picture was made not to conceal or destroy the apple, but to adorn and preserve it. The picture was made for the apple, not the apple for the picture. So let us act that neither picture or apple shall ever be blurred or bruised or broken." To Lincoln, just as the picture of silver is made to show off something more valuable, being the apples of gold, so is the Constitution and the Union made to show off something more valuable, which is the principle of liberty to all. The Constitution and the Union are therefore not ends in themselves, but rather a means to a higher end. Although slavery is not mentioned in the letter, it's clear that Lincoln had it in mind. To Lincoln, the idea of slavery should be based on a higher moral law or standard that exists rather than on popular opinion. This is why he fought so adamantly against his rival Stephen A. Douglas several years earlier. Douglas advocated for popular sovereignty, in which the issue of slavery would be decided by the individual states and those directly affected by it. Lincoln, on the other hand, believed that the American founders had created the Constitution off of a moral law centered around liberty. Therefore, the Constitution and Union were a means to ultimately end slavery long term through the authority of Congress. This note, while brief, shows Abraham Lincoln's view on the United States government and history, which therefore provides a basis for his opinion on slavery. It seems to reach the heart of his motives and consequently his actions. Lincoln concludes that we may so act, we must study and understand the points of danger. So Abraham Lincoln was a man who thought deeply about issues before he acted upon them. And he thought first not as a politician, but rather as a human being.